Hey everyone, welcome to San Rosa Creations, where my goal is to present you with videos about crafting and being neurodivergent. So what I'd like to start with this year is talking about tools that I use in my office to help make crafting easier for me. I do have ADHD and I am autistic, so sometimes I can have difficulties with following directions or multi-step processes, reading really long directions if there's not a video, and even sometimes just like having the patience to cut the the pattern pieces. That can be difficult sometimes. And I know it sounds very simple. It sounds like, oh well, you should be able to do that, right? You so yes, but those things do not come easily to me. So what I've done is I've curated some helpers in my office, and I want to share those with you. So here are my top 3 craft tools to help with my sewing and my ADHD. So first up on the list is my projector. Now, my projector is one of my favorite tools in my craft office. It really helps with my ADHD because I don't have to print out patterns. I can just project them onto my cutting surface and my material and then just cut them. So what I often do is that if a pattern does not come with a projector file, I'll use Adobe Illustrator to convert it into a projector file. I use Adobe Illustrator a lot in my craft just because, again, I don't necessarily do well with like that multi-step of having to print a pattern and then tape it together and then cut it and then use it on my fabric. I just can't. My brain cannot. And so this particular model was pricier. I did buy it secondhand on eBay, but I went with this model because I knew I didn't want anything to be mounted to my ceiling or mounted to the wall. I wanted something small and light. So just fair warning, this particular model and like similar models to it are pretty pricey. But I will put a link into the Facebook group. So I'll put a link into the Facebook group. That way you have access to learn about how you can use projectors in your sewing. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to show you how I use my projector for my sewing. Alright, so what we have going on here, let me see if I can keep it. Try not to move. But anyway, so what I have here is, this is my projector file. So this is actually the Dia-Cutie crossbody bag, so not using anyone else's pattern. So don't worry about that. So this is my own design, and I created a projector file for it. So the convenient part is that I can take my fabric and cut out whatever piece I need. And oops, lost the light there. But yeah, so that's essentially how it works, is that I project it onto my cutting surface, I put down my fabric, and then I just cut out what I need. You always want to make sure you measure everything, and normally a projector file comes with a 1-inch square. And again, I'm not here to explain all the logistics and how to use a projector. This is one of the tools that I use to make sewing easier for me. So the next tool I have is the Silhouette Cameo. I do have the Pro. It was a splurge purchase on my part. I tend to use my big girl job money to buy the things I need to make crafting easier for me. And one of them was this cutting machine. I know there's a lot of debate out there between Cricut and Silhouette, and honestly, I've owned them all. And I think they're really just good. All of them. It just depends on which one you vibe with the most, because I had a Maker and a Cricut Maker and a Cricut Explorer, and I love them. The reason I went with the Cameo Pro though was just because it has a wider cutting space, because you can cut up to 24 inches by 24 inches. But I do want to be clear that this is not, an industrial machine in any way. So you're not going to be sitting here cutting out like hundreds of patterns a day. But what I do use it for in particular is like, if I can cut out a whole bag on here, I will, instead of like cutting it by hand. And if I, like if it's small enough that I don't need to put it on a projector, like if it's small enough that it'll fit on the silhouette, I'll cut it on the silhouette. And like things like the Purse Pal or the Pocket Pal, I could cut like a couple of them on here at a time. So that would be convenient. So that is one pattern you can kind of like batch sew if you're into that. But essentially what I do is, again, I use Illustrator a lot, Adobe Illustrator. So if a pattern does not come with an SVG, I will make an SVG file. And there's a couple of ways to do that. I plan to do a video on how to do these things. I know some people use Affinity, whatever the Affinity, maybe it's not Publisher, whatever the Affinity equivalent of Adobe Illustrator is. I have a film degree, and so I've always used Adobe. I use Adobe for film editing and things like that. So that's kind of just my thought process on there. But yeah, so I use the silhouette to cut out all those patterns. Like one that I use a lot is the Tanya Minimoto bag. I always cut all the pieces. So this is the Tanya Minimoto bag. And I cut this out on the Silhouette Pro. So I cut out the accent vinyl, and this sienna clay from Mormino. I cut that on there. I will say it didn't like cutting the sienna clay. Like it would cut through most of it, but then not the last layer. So I do want to be honest about that the Silhouette takes practice and patience. So if you don't have patience, don't bother with it because it's gonna slow you down. I just like to use it because I don't like curves. I hate cutting curves. So I tend to, like, if it's a circular, like the Tanya Minimoto, like this has a curve, and like the main body piece has a curve. So I tend to just cut those out just like that. I'm trying to think of what else. What are the notes about the Cameo? I love it. I just, it helps me to really up the quantity of bags that I do make, because I don't have to like sit there and again print out a pattern piece and then try to make it. My neurodivergent brain just can't with that many steps. And so I'll start to dread making a bag, right? Like I'll dread it because I don't have the patience. And I just really struggle with that multi-step process of printing out the pattern, taping it together, cutting it out, and then finally getting to my cutting out my fabric. This and the projector, game changers for me. All right, so here is my last vital piece to sewing more bags. And I do want to say, that it's different for everybody, right? It just depends on your needs and your preferences, but these are things that have worked for me. And it is the TheraFuse Self-Adhesive from Fabric Therapy. This has become my new favorite. Honestly, I have a bunch of Decaville Light and Decaville Heavy, and I do still use it, especially the Decaville Heavy for like I used it for the bottom of this bag, the mini shortened Trailblazer. I used it at the bottom, the Decaville Heavy. But honestly, if I don't, what I love about this stuff, I can sew through it with my machine, so I don't have to like worry about cutting it smaller and keeping out of my seam allowance. So I can just often just like, what I do personally is that I like use my projector, I cut out the pattern piece, or I use my Silhouette Cameo, cut out the pattern piece, and then I just trace it over this and then cut it out. And then so I'm just all set. There's something to be said about making the process easier, and there's no shame in that. There's no shame in making the process easier for yourself. I've sewn more bags in the last year because I've set myself up in a way that the process is easier for me, and I'm not ashamed of that. I love the fact that I can do things more quickly. But yeah, so this is self-adhesive TheraFuse from Fabric Therapy. What you do is you just like cut it and then you adhere it to your bag to add, you know, to stabilize it. This is your stabilizer. And oftentimes that's more than enough. Like the Tanya Minimoto, I used only Fabric Therapy, and like it's got such great structure to it and it just looks really good. So most of the times that's all I need. In the in this bag here, all I used was TheraFuse except for the bottom of the bag, and so it gives it really good structure. So really I don't need more than that. So those are my top 3. So thanks for joining me, and I hope that you have found something useful here. Again, I will add more details as far as like my projector and sewing projector groups and the silhouette Cameo and things like that. I probably will do more detailed videos on like how I use my projector and how I use my silhouette Cameo to cut out pattern pieces and how I convert those. So look for those in the future.